Welcome to Let's Chat with Julie Lewin and the Trauma Talk series, where together we'll navigate the depths of the impact trauma has on our lives and collective well-being, shining a light on resilience, healing, and the transformative power of doing the inner work. I'm your host, Julie Lewin. Thank you for joining us. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Chat with Julie Lewin. And today I have a very special guest, Anita Bentata, and I hope I said that right, Anita.
Yes, all good.
And I am so excited for this episode because Anita has been doing groundbreaking work with helping people through trauma. And Anita, why don't I introduce you properly and then we'll get into it.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Okay. So I was so thrilled when Anita applied to be on our podcast. Anita is a multi-international and national award-winning inspirational speaker, consultant, and passionate advocate. And she is dedicated to combating domestic violence probably because of the journey that you've been through, and you just didn't want anyone else to do what you had to go through. And because of that history, Anita ignites her audience with powerful messages. And she's the author of The Wolf in a Suit. I want to hear more about that, Anita. And you're also the driving force behind a survivors group called Melbourne Women Starting Again. And I don't know if you've been watching the news here in Australia. It's just nuts crazy as far as women's safety. So I think that you're doing something really powerful, Anita. You also train individuals to be proactive supporters and champions of change. I really love that. And you are an advocate that personal self-care and taking action against bystander inaction is so important. So you've got 24 years experience, you created your essential method, you train people, you appear at conferences, panels and summits, and you've been in a documentary called Dangerous Dance. And I am in awe of what you've achieved in your lifetime. So why don't we get into it and we have a good old chat. So here we go. Okay, Anita, why don't you just tell us a little bit of a background?
Sure.
And then we'll get in and we'll start talking about some of the things that we shared in our previous conversation of where we really resonate.
Sure. And just to clarify, because clearly you've done a bit of research on me, I no longer run that women's group, Women Starting
Oh,
Again.
don't you?
No.
Okay.
And I used to do lots of talks on domestic violence. And what I found
Okay.
was that people that would come to the talks, I really wanted to help community and families recognize what was going on within their own groups. And so I used to run these talks, but what I found was that the people that attended were the survivors, and other people thought it wasn't relevant to them. And so I used to ask these women that would attend the events, did you have early warning signs? Because what brought me into the field of psychotherapy and trauma is my own personal experience. I escaped domestic violence with my two young girls when they were quite young. And after I'd had a couple of years of therapy, I then changed careers and went to uni and studied. And so when I was asking these women if they had any early warning signs, every single woman said yes. And that was also true for me in my own experience. And so I got to thinking, rather than trying to educate people that don't perceive that it's relevant, or trying to change the people that perpetrate abuse because they're in denial of what they're doing, it's far easier to help people to connect to their instinct and trust their instinct. And so you mentioned I've been working in the field 24 years. It's actually 29, but 24 years.
Oh, well, that information I got is obviously old info.
Oh,
So
no, you probably read
I'm
it.
glad that it opened the conversation for
Yeah.
us to actually
Oh,
clarify
I'll
that.
just add, it was 24 years ago that I developed my method. So that's where
Right,
you've probably read it from.
right.
So,
Probably, yeah.
because I went to uni and found that the qualifications at uni are really inadequate, and so I went
That's
and
what I'm
did
hearing.
a further
Yeah.
4 years of study on developmental trauma, acute and chronic trauma, defense systems, how trauma affects the brain and the body, a whole range of different
Mm,
things. And so I was practicing
mm,
in that way because that's the method that helped me personally and made a huge
yeah.
difference for clients for over 2 decades. But then I had a
Yeah. So,
number of life events that came up that led me
yeah.
to question certain things and realize with the study of neuroscience and the mind body system that there were actually things at odds with the in the training that I did. And so
Really?
I was always talking about what are the gaps in that there are gaps in the
Yeah.
qualifications. And so
Yeah.
then one day I said to myself, well, I'm always talking about the gaps. What would it look like if it didn't have gaps? And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's when 5 years ago I wrote my method and thought, oh my God, I have to do this. So I retired as a psychotherapist and I just teach this as a course now
So you're teaching this to
to anybody.
practitioners,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
anybody?
to practitioners as well as individuals. So it's not specific to domestic violence because this is the way, whether we've had trauma or not, our brain works in the same way. It's just we're not given the tools on how to help when there's overwhelm or trauma or
Yeah.
confusion.
And
So
and
I teach
you
that.
yeah, so what I wanted, like what that sparked for me, Anita, is I've read many things about people saying, look, I'm really struggling and I feel like I've experienced trauma, but my trauma's not as bad as that other person over there. Who am I to complain? Just suck it up and keep going. And I really want to hear your perspective of trauma is trauma. Like, whether I, as an individual, experience is better or worse than my neighbor or someone in another city, it affects us neurologically, physiologically, and spiritually.
And
So,
relationally.
and relationally. So, what do you say to people who kind of downplay what's happening to them rather than and kind of gaslighting themselves? What have you got any thoughts on that?
Yes. Well, what I do say to people is when your system doesn't feel safe, supported, or resourced to respond to
Mm,
whatever's going on in the moment, the the two hemispheres of the brain disconnect from each other because our system says there's too much input coming in that I don't know how to deal with. So it's not about
right.
the severity of what's going on. As soon as it's I don't feel resourced, supported, or safe, the system will
Mhm.
disconnect and it goes into the stress managing mode.
Yeah,
So absolutely, I agree with you. It's
yeah,
not about someone else has more worse trauma. It's as soon as it's
yeah.
too much for your system.
Right,
And
right.
developmentally, depending on our own background, we've all got different thresholds of what we can tolerate.
Exactly, exactly. And, as you were saying that about the brain disconnecting, I remember, back, I don't know, maybe in the 1990s, before we had the internet, before it we had so much information available to us, I had this thought, I want to connect my left and right brains together, like the hemispheres. So I did this meditation every single day, probably for months, maybe even a whole year, where I imagined between the left and right brain, I was putting copper wire connecting my brain together so that I was more whole in how I interacted with the world. And I think that that had an impact. And the other thing that I did was I spent a whole year using my other hand to open doors, to brush my teeth, to bring that connection between left and right brain more powerfully together. Do you think that what I did there actually built some neural bridges?
Oh, for sure. Whenever we do something new, it's going to build bridges, and it dependent on how often we use those same habits as to how strong
Mm,
those neural pathways
mm,
are. And I want to add to that that the brain goes to what it's done most recently and most frequently. So if we're
right.
wanting to use our whole brain, we want to
Yeah.
know how to interrupt the old patterns without creating a stress or a opposition in the system, where the system would
Mm,
then be split between
yeah.
the part that wants to keep doing whatever we've been doing or doubts the new thing, and how to soothe and support our system to continue progressing. Because what I find is one of the reasons why people get stuck in their old habits and loops and limited
Mm,
patterns is because they don't know how to progress in a way that
yeah.
doesn't create a split in the system where they're in a doubt mode or a conflict, because it's hard for most people to trust the unknown.
Correct. And what we do is we go back to the autonomic pattern
Hmm.
that we don't have to think about. It takes over.
Yes, yeah. And
And
so the brain
so
doesn't like empty spaces, so it's going to keep returning back to what we always do if we don't give it something that our system has a complete, with integrity, yes for, where our mind and our body are aligned,
mm,
because we don't want to have a split system, because that's not effective. We want our whole system to be aligned.
right. And when I created this process in the last 20 years, I can't remember exactly when I did, where I help people or I facilitate and co-create with my clients how they can remove the charge out of their body. And I call it emotional, mm, I don't even know what I call it. I've gone blank. Basically, we take that out, but I always put something back in because I knew intuitively we can't have that space, that empty space.
Mm,
So let's say we take fear out. I just say to my clients, so what is it that you would like in there? And they'll say joy or happiness or
mm,
peace, or like it's each individual person's choice what they want in that space. It's life transforming to do those things.
mm, mm. Yeah.
And so uh I didn't know that there was a science reason why I was putting something back in.
Uh-huh.
All I knew was that if we didn't put something else in, the old thing would come back and fill that space.
Yes. It's like we've got
Yeah.
this garden, and if we don't tend to it, other
Mm,
things will grow there based on history, what's happening in the world. When we don't feel resourced, we'll internalize
mm,
it and make a meaning out of it, and our system believes us. It doesn't question us. Like, one gentleman came in for an individual session a few years ago, and he said, I'm stuck. And for me, the way we label things is very powerful, because as soon as you
mm,
say, I'm stuck, your system, you can feel that brick wall in front of you when you say it, because of how
mm.
it's
Yeah,
labeled.
yeah.
But I don't like to use affirmations, because for me, affirmations create a polarity, a split in the system. There's our
That's so
Yeah, our
interesting,
system
Anita.
likes the idea of it, but then because the brain's associational, it will connect immediately to the exceptions to that, or the questions about the future.
Oh my goodness. Do you know what? You're the first person that I've spoken to who said they don't like affirmations because I don't.
Uh-huh.
It is the last thing that I want to do.
Yes.
And those things that you just said, it creates, well, the, the exception, it will find those
Mm,
nooks and crannies And that's exactly where my brain goes.
Yes.
And or I go, well, that's BS.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly. And we
it
might
voids it.
try to minimize that inner talk and
Mm,
turn the volume down on it, but it's still there in our energy system. Even
yeah,
if we want to ignore it, it's still there. So it's creating a split.
correct.
So when this gentleman said he was stuck, I developed my own self-talk method that I teach people in my course to shift those old neural pathway patterns and trauma patterns, or
Yeah.
just stress, or just to expand in growth mindset. And so I
Mm,
said to him, how would it be to say to yourself, I'm pausing right now. I'm pausing because I don't
yeah,
want to repeat what I've always done. And I'm receptive to something that works better for all of who I am right now. So we're still being with the
yeah.
experience, but we're not labeling it in a way that shuts our system down.
Correct.
And we're
Correct.
orienting to a generative pathway, so there's possibilities. Because as soon as we say I'm pausing and I'm receptive to something that works better for me, because I don't want to repeat what I've always done,
Yeah,
then our system can feel comfortable, and there's no split in the system. Yeah.
that's right. And you know what, Anita? I always say I'm parking it.
Mm-hmm.
And that when you park something, you you can come back and you can start driving that again. And so I know I used to really, really annoy people, and I'd say, "Oh, I'm going to do this." My dad used to call me Gunner, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I would get a little ways down the track and then I'd go, I don't know what to do next. And so I would park it and I'd go and I'd do something else and I'd learn what I need to do next in this parked thing. So I'd come back and I'd do that.
Yeah.
And then I go, oh, I don't know what to do next. So then I'd go off and do another project. So I had projects everywhere. Now, I'm not saying that people need to do that. That's my personality. But I don't recall saying I'm stuck
Mm.
or that I would say I'll just park that for now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that kind of gave me permission to come back. But a lot of those projects that I parked, I finished.
Yeah.
It just took
Awesome.
me years,
Yeah. And what
years
I
and
find
years.
happens is that when there's something that we're grappling with and we don't know that the next step, when we park it, your unconscious will keep doing its search, and it will bring it of its own accord back to
100%.
you. But when you're trying
Yeah.
to find it, it's like when you lose something and you're looking and looking and looking and you can't find it, and then you relax about it and then you find it.
And there it is.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? As you're saying that, um, when people don't know what to do, and this is in my medical intuitive metaphysical body language, they will get a sore neck. They might say, oh, that's right, I didn't drink enough water yesterday, I slept on my pillow wrong, I've woken up with a crooked neck. But what I have learned over the decades of working with people, when they get a sore neck, they actually don't have all the information to make a decision. And so it creates tension in their body and the tension in their neck, and then they get a sore neck. And so I just say to people, join your two fingers together, put your hands like that, and say, I am open to receiving the information I need. And then saying, I can do that. I can do that until your body has that rush. And then they say to me, oh my God, Julie, I got that information in the next 24 hours.
Yeah.
Because they've coded in
Yeah.
that they're open to receiving it.
Yes. And there's no conflict, that when you're saying that statement, it's like so the system has
That's
a
it.
yes, and our system
Yeah,
follows
yeah,
feelings and energy, not willpower and conscious cognitive.
100%.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. And, the other thing that I say to people, and this is how I live, follow the the random thoughts that might pop in. And I remember a couple of weeks ago, I thought of this person I've known for 10 years. I thought of her randomly and I thought, oh, I'm going to reach out and see if she wants to be on my podcast. And I followed the inspiration, but she messaged me and half an hour later and she said, oh my goodness, Julie, you're not going to believe this. I have just been meditating. Before I went into the meditation, I asked for a sign of what I need to do next. And there's your message, which I received when she would have asked that question.
Yeah,
And I said, well, I have no qualms about saying God answers.
yeah.
And it's about us as, human receivers to take action on the messages that we get.
And
And
to
often,
create a receptive mode within ourselves, because often our mind is overthinking so much that we cloud the signal, and so we don't actually hear the messages or sense
yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I find that is so magical, and I expect to have magical episodes in my day.
Mm.
Do you expect to have magical episodes in your day?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
And one of the things that I do in my course is we do lots of one of the modules is lots of fun experiments so that
yeah,
people can believe how they can create. And because often we block our own expectations and intentions because of
mm,
self-doubt, and a history of perceiving ourselves in a particular embodied way instead of the true whole self of who we are. And so I find
yeah,
doing those experiments helps people to let go of their preconceptions about what's possible and who they are and what they can connect to in generative life energy. And
yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
then go for it with
That's
those
awesome.
expectations.
Yeah. And I think I say this on nearly every podcast. When I spoke with Dr. Vishal Rao, and he said that the people who are A, the happiest, B, they have the best chance of healing from something, whether it's cancer or another disease or something, are the ones with low expectations and high acceptance. And I took that not to be that you don't have expectations of yourself, it's actually expectations of others, because everyone's a human being. And if you don't have high expectations of other people, then you won't be disappointed. But if you have high acceptance, you're open to pivoting, you're open to the rhythm of life and finding the magic in the the rhythm of all humanity, rather than you have this idea of, well, that person needs to behave like this, that person needs to behave like that, and then I will get what I want. It's more being able to have a dance with all of that. And if you have lower expectations of others or life, then you actually are not creating such a polarity. Have I explained that
Yeah,
okay?
I understand what you're saying. What I go to in when you talk about having low expectations is often I find people when they, for example, have high expectations, they might label it as I've got high expectations, and they're not aware of the nuances within that energy and that feeling state. And it's actually for want of a better word, contaminated with urgency or fear or trying to use willpower to make it happen. And
Mm,
they don't
yeah,
realize that it's not pure expectation. Because for me, if
right.
it's pure expectation, they've got the acceptance and the allowing and the peace. But if they've got expectation of, and there's a fear it might not happen, then I think that kind of expectation is not a helpful one to be
Not
embodying.
healthy. Yeah,
So, but if it's
yeah,
clean expectation and there's not an attachment to when it shows
that's the
itself in the
word.
physical, then I think
Yeah.
that's really, really powerful. Yeah.
Yes, it's the attachment.
Yeah.
that we put to the expectation that causes the conflict.
Yes. So one of the things I find that people really get a lot out of when mentoring them is to be able to attune more to the energy and the feeling of what they're thinking or saying, because often there might be nuances that they're not aware of. Like when I used to do therapy years ago and we'd shift something and I'd ask them, you know, out of 10, how much did they believe it was all clear? And they often had doubts in their system, and yet when we muscle
Yeah,
tested their system, it was completely gone. So
right.
it's
So
really,
where was the, like, you muscle test the system, but the doubts were in their mind, so there's a difference between physiologically and mentally.
yes. So I find it's so important. The way I see it is our body energy and feelings can shift states very quickly. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we all have experience of that in good ways and not so uplifting ways, yeah,
Yeah.
where the body and energy can shift very fast. But
Yes.
we need our mind to be able to do that fast shift too, or it
Yeah.
lags us and takes us back to what our brain's done most recently and most frequently. So we want to be able to
Right.
get all of our mind, body, and energy all going on in the same direction. So then there isn't
Yeah.
that split.
And I think, Anita, that's why with the work that I do, that I like people to have an experience, a co-created experience, so that they experience the shift physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. It's a full-bodied experience of the shift that they're experiencing. And then they can go back to that experience as the last thing that happened. And that maybe that's why our Akira is so powerful, because people are having an experience.
Oh, experience, I think, is the thing that our system is only interested in. It's not interested
Mm,
in ideas of things. It's
and words.
it's in words. It's interested in
Yeah,
the state, the
yeah,
feeling, and the energy in the moment. And
yeah,
it
yeah.
sounds like you've got your
Wow.
own method for that, and
I
I've got
do have a
I've got
method
my
for
own
that,
method.
Anita, and chatting with you today is so awesome to actually have a little few more of my puzzle pieces come together. So I want to come back to trauma, and I want to know, and I know people will want to know, what did you do personally in your inner, like, you went and had therapy, you decided to be a psychotherapist, but what else did you do, like, day to day, to kind of find a safe space within the memories of your trauma? What did you do
Well,
to find that
I
safe
spent
space?
like 10 plus years in therapy, and I still,
Yeah.
because of my early childhood, I still had
Mm.
things like the basic template was still there. And that was
Yeah.
what led me to question, even though the training I did was excellent on so many levels, it still had
Mm.
many significant gaps. And
Mm.
so some of the things I did, because I went searching for different therapy to see if those gaps could be addressed, and
Mm.
I nothing addressed it. So I
Yeah.
did a range of different things out in the world, but then it was when I developed my method that's really what took care of those things. But some of the things
Yeah.
that I did was still that were very, very helpful is I took myself to a festival, and it was one where there's a lot of freedom and expression and camping and
Mm.
workshops and a lot of people who are very friendly, and so you
Mhm.
get to meet lots of people, and it immediately when you go do something that's not your habit, your
Mm.
system's got an opportunity to grow because you're not got the momentum to keep repeating what you've always done. So
Mhm.
I found going to new places that had an
Okay.
opportunity to expand and practice being more of myself, showing more of myself, whether it was
Yeah.
talking to people socially because I was very introverted growing up,
Mm.
or dancing, or doing different activities that and the other thing that really made a difference for me is when I started Latin dancing, and that for me felt like it was very therapeutic, because when I'd always done dancing on my own but not partner
Yeah.
dancing, and so when I did
Yeah.
Latin dancing, you've got to have your body in a particular state of holding that you can
Mm.
pick up the signals through the hand, because the man's not going to tell you what to do. You've
No.
got to pick it up through the subtle things that he does with his hand holding your hand. And if you're
Mm.
too tense, the message doesn't go through. If you're too slack, again, the message doesn't go through. So you've got to hold strength in your system, but not over strength. And so
Right.
you've got this way of being in your body and focused on being in your body, but also being aware of other at the same time. And you've also got to be aware of the space around you so you don't step on anyone or they don't step on you, especially with Latin dancing because it's fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and lots of
Yeah.
spinning and everything. And so
Yeah.
for me, it felt very therapeutic because my system from my childhood had me dissociate an extraordinary amount. But the
Mm.
dancing had me, I had to be in my body, and I had
You
to be
had to.
connected to other
Yeah.
and connected to my surroundings. And so that was really, really powerful, and a beautiful way to support myself and grow. And yeah, it
And
was stunning.
so by doing the Latin dancing, you were building new neural pathways to be associated in your body and to be really present.
Yes,
And so the more Latin dancing you did, the stronger that pathway became.
yes,
And that's how you actually were able to help yourself move into your future, as in
yes,
be present and have your future life
yeah.
be more positive.
And there was one of the dance moves that would end up you being hammerlocked behind. And without
Right.
my conscious mind being involved, the body memory was activated because of the domestic violence. And
Yeah.
but because I'm doing it with someone I feel safe with, and I'm in an
Yeah.
environment of joy and fun, it helped in a very easy way to shift that body memory by taking it from the fright to a place of safety and everything's okay. So there
Oh
were
my
so many
goodness.
layers to it that were really, really good.
Anita, thank you so much for sharing this. And I hope that the people listening to this episode are like soaking all of this in, because I think that what you've just shared is absolutely magical, that you didn't go Latin dancing to heal your trauma.
Mm,
You went Latin dancing to experience something new and to experience joy. But it gave you so much more, because your mind works in a way that you can actually unravel the all the nuances of how that impacted
yes.
on you.
The other
And
thing
I absolutely love it.
Thank you. The other thing that was brilliant about the Latin dancing is I came from a childhood where I tried to be invisible, and I was also invisible due to a lot of neglect. And in Latin dancing, it's all about the man showing the woman off and you taking up your
Mm,
space and shining. There's actually shines that you have to do in it.
yeah.
So it was really wonderful on that therapeutic level too, to take up space and be
Yes.
seen and appreciated and be playful. Because what I often find is when we've had trauma, we don't want to be playful, because when we're playful, we're not in control. We're being spontaneous,
Right.
we're letting go. And our inner
Yes.
protector says, I have to be in control because I never again want to experience what happened to me. And so we often become too serious and not very playful.
Oh
unless
my
we're, say, maybe
goodness.
drinking or something, but then we're disconnected, so it might feel safe then.
Yes.
So it's really important to have experiences where we can be playful and let go. And because
Yeah.
we've had associations with control being taken over us, and we want to be able to
Mhm.
experience a healthy control, like the man leading,
Yeah.
and it can actually be a good thing and support us and enhance us. And
Yeah.
going to that with the dancing, my system, because you don't know what's going to happen in the next step, I would
Second.
unconsciously try to back lead, try to anticipate what was going to happen next in the beginning in it. So it
So you
helps
had to
you,
let that go.
it helps you let go and trust in the
Mhm.
moment and be okay
Mhm.
if you don't get the signal, because I was worried I'd get it wrong. So it's so therapeutic and lots of
That's
fun.
amazing. I can't tell you how much I love this conversation because my kids actually, Tash was very shy, and I hope she won't mind me sharing. Tash was very shy and very like didn't know how to fit in. And I don't know. I don't even know where she got the idea to go Latin dancing. I think she was about 18 and she said, "Mum, will you come with me the first time?" And I said, "Sure." And so I went with her the first time. She met up with someone that she met up with every year at my mum and dad's, like 4 hours away. Felicity recognized us and Tash said, "Mum, you don't have to come with me anymore. I'll meet up with Felicity." She thrived when she was doing the Latin dancing and she became a student teacher. She got voted best student teacher of the year and she absolutely thrived. And I could see how the dance actually helped her through childhood trauma that she had experienced. She's going to love this conversation. And our son saw what she was doing, that looks like fun. So he went too, and they spent 5 or 6 years dancing,
Yeah.
and he became a performance dancer and danced in all sorts of places because he loved it so much.
Mm,
And now, as I think back, I would say that was the making of Tash and Tris,
mm.
was doing the dancing.
Oh, it's so
And
powerful for
it
our
the
sense of
Latin
self.
dancing, yeah,
Mm,
yeah,
mm.
yeah. Oh my goodness, I didn't keep going, but I I think I envied people who could dance, but I didn't go and do it myself. But you know what? You've inspired me that maybe I should go and have a dance because it sounds like so much fun.
I just found every
And
time I heard Latin music, without even realizing, I'd have this huge smile on my face. It just spoke to my heart. And my
yeah,
ancestors, which I didn't think of at the time because it was so automatic with that joy that it brought, my ancestors on my father's side came from Spain. So,
no.
so
Okay.
there was that cellular connection to that as well.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
Latin dancing is amazing for so many elements of health and fitness because it's a good
yeah,
workout, and there's so many different types of Latin dancing. But what I wanted to say was, when I started, I wasn't
yeah,
very coordinated. I'd always
yeah,
felt struggled when I used to do the aerobics, like the dance kind of aerobic. I always was
same.
slow and struggled and felt uncoordinated. But because I
Yeah,
had such a joy about the Latin dancing, I was able to be okay with how I was at the beginning. And I got so immersed in it. I was going like 6 nights a week for
yeah, same with
classes,
my kid.
yeah, for
Yeah,
classes and then social dancing afterwards. And so when you immerse yourself that much, you can't not improve. And so then
yes,
I became quite good at it. And
yes.
it became easy, and I was no longer the identity that I was before, of being not able to learn those things. I was able to learn things quickly and well. So that
So
was
do
awesome.
you think that Latin dancing actually changed your brain and that you were able to learn other things away from dancing more quickly as well?
Absolutely, because what changes neural pathways is not cognition, it's feelings.
Right,
Yeah, feelings mobilizes action. And
right.
so, if we don't have feelings, if you think about when you're anxious or depressed, you're not motivated to take action and do some behavior. Yeah. But
Yeah,
feelings is what gives us information about our experience and
yeah,
mobilizes us into an action, into a behavior. So,
yeah.
absolutely, when that's happening, then we've got neural pathways lighting up and firing and wiring.
You know, and I might have talked about this story on another episode. I don't remember, but I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I started using my phone and taking photos of flowers. I love flowers, and we had a lot of flowers in our garden, and so I would just take my phone and I'd go like really close like that and be like this far away from the flower, and I'd take my goal was to take macro photos with a normal phone. And what I noticed though was if I got really quite close to a flower, if my energy wasn't centered, the flower would move like this. And so the flower was feeling my energy. And so what I would have to do is actually center myself before I could get the shot that I wanted,
Yeah.
before my phone would stay stable enough for me to press the button. And so I did this every single day. And what I noticed was that, I'm 5'5", 5'6". Those little flowers that we might call weeds down on the road or the footpath or in the bank, they're like smaller than my fingernail, like they're only about that big, but I was fascinated to see what they look like. So I would get really close down and take a macro photo so that we could see it like a big flower. And I was just in awe and wonder of this. And so I started doing walks in our local area. We live nearby a river. And so there was lots of opportunities for me to take these photos of small flowers. But you know what happened? I then, with my coaching and my intuition work, was able to go chung, straight, like really hone in really fast on the micro that was causing the issue, because I was viewing the micro of our environment with photos and flowers, but I also was able to really hone in with laser focus on what was causing friction or a challenge for somebody that other people weren't able to help them with. And I think it's because I trained my brain to do, and I'd take photos of these things, and people on the walk with me said, where did you find that? I said, oh, it's just over there. Didn't you see it? And they'd say, no, didn't see it. And
Yes.
so I trained myself to see things that other people don't see.
Fantastic.
But
Yeah.
I didn't set out for that to be the outcome.
Yeah.
I set out to have fun and
Yeah.
take photos of flowers.
And yeah.
You set out to have fun and dance,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it helped you learn things faster,
Yes.
and it changed your how you interact with the world.
Yeah. And it changed my sense of self.
Yeah.
Yeah. It actually, to correct, it's not that it changed my sense of self. It allowed me to be my true sense of self.
Yeah. That's it.
Mm.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I often see people and they say, I don't even know who I am. And so I think if you're listening to this and you have that thought come through your mind, Anita and I have just given you 2 ways to actually find who you are.
Mm. Mm.
And it's not by thinking.
No. Follow the
Actually, by
joy and all the benefits will come. Yeah, your
yeah,
logical mind might think, oh, but that's just a waste of time or something. But our
yeah,
logical mind is the left brain, it's not the right brain. And the right brain, which is connected to our feelings and the unknown and energy and the creation, knows more than your left brain that's very mathematical, logical, hard,
mm,
reality, fit on solid things. And so when you follow
yeah.
the feeling and the good feelings, it takes you beyond what you know. And yeah,
That's
absolutely.
fantastic. I have enjoyed this so much.
Thank you.
Anita, is there anything like that we haven't like I think that we're doing this in the trauma series. We haven't really talked about trauma, but that's the secret, right?
Can I share with you, when I developed my
Yeah.
method, I got government funding in 2020. So I ran my program online for women all around Australia. And these were all women that had been in trauma and domestic violence. And some were still in domestic violence. And in the application process, they were stuck and they knew they needed to get out, but they couldn't. From
Yeah.
day one in the course, we never talked about domestic violence. We didn't talk about safety plans. We didn't talk about red flags. We didn't do any of that. From day one, I just taught people how to switch your brain and body out of the stress response, how to soothe yourself from the residual of it, and how to
Yeah.
progress. Within about
Yeah.
2 weeks, I had women emailing and ringing me saying, I'm out. We're in our new home. We're in the car on the way to our new home, and we didn't talk about it at all. We keep looping
That's
back into the
yeah.
problem because we don't have the resources and the support on how to
Yeah.
progress. And so this is
Yeah.
relevant, yes, for people in trauma, but for anybody that
Yeah.
wants to progress in a more faster,
Yeah.
easier, more uplifting way, because the
And that's
we can use it. It's the way the brain and the mind body system works. So you can use it for
yeah, I
whatever
love it.
context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about this whole conversation. I We're on the same page. Basically, we're on the same page about all of this. And, you know, I think that we have shared some really insightful things for our listeners to, um, take and run with in their own lives. Is there anything that you want to say to wrap up?
Can I share when my next course is?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I run it in Melbourne, but I always have people online as well who can't physically be here. So we have it live online for other people to attend, and we're starting
Yep.
again in the start of June on
Awesome.
a full day on Sunday. It's 6 full days, and we do it two
Okay.
weeks on a Sunday for 2 Sundays in a row, and then 2 weeks off, and then 2 weeks on again. So we get the 12 modules, 2 modules per full day. And
Awesome.
so if anyone wants more information about it, you're welcome to contact me.
We'll put the link down in the podcast description.
All right.
That's fantastic.
Or if people want
Anita,
my book, they can
yeah,
contact me.
absolutely. Yeah, tell me a little bit about the book before we wrap up.
Sure. In it, part one is my story, and I talk about how I got caught in domestic violence and how I got out and what life was like after it, and just my thoughts on it. And I share the Little Red Riding Hood story in relation to my story, which came up
Uh-huh.
organically with clients when I was working. So
Mhm.
that's my story. But you can see the bigger part two is me speaking as a psychotherapist. And I retell
Okay.
11 fairy tales in here. And so I tell the
Okay.
original story. And then each chapter is complete on its own, where one's about family, one's about um, trauma, one's about what else is there? Gosh. There's just so much information. But yeah,
Don't worry, Anita. I've written 3 books, and when I talk about them, I go, "Oh, I know I wrote this book, but I just have to look it up because I can't remember what I said."
yeah. So like one chapter's on what is abuse, the types of abuse and the difference between abuse and conflict. one about family,
Uh,
culture, history, religion, one about love, false love, and the hooks and what makes it hard to leave, one about anger, power, assertion, aggression, and passivity, one about hope and the cycle of violence. And I take it in very different directions. Like what I'm speaking about here is not your common knowledge. One about
mm,
women's unique stress response and stress, and one about closure and healing and the feminine instinct.
yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I think that that is a really good book to get a hold of. So, Anita, I have absolutely loved this chat, and I hope that our listeners have loved it as
Hope
well.
so.
We'll have all your contact details in the description, and oh, I hope that everything goes really well for you, and let's stay in touch.
That would be lovely. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Julie. Great chatting with you.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Let's Chat with Julie Lewin and our special guest, Anita Bentata. Wow, I am still in awe of what we chatted about. And even though the episode was about trauma talk, we didn't talk about trauma. And that's the secret behind what Anita does. And it's also the secret behind what I do. We don't re-traumatize people when we are doing our work. And so we didn't consciously do that in this podcast, but it was absolutely amazing. We talked about Latin dancing. We talked about photography. We talked about things that have been able to move us through our own unique trauma and also help our clients with their trauma by building new neural pathways. And that is the key. So we hope that you found something amazing for yourself in this podcast and that you can take away something actionable. And if you enjoyed the episode, please like and follow wherever you see this recording or this podcast, whatever platform you're on. And if there's something that you would like us to talk about and we haven't yet, or there's someone that you think that we should have a chat with, please let us know and we will follow that up for you. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, the journey to self-discovery doesn't end on the airwaves. It is an ongoing process. So until next time, may you find courage, peace, and magic on your unique path. See you.